In the first video of our Getting Started series, today I'm going to show you how easy it is to set up Home Assistant with just a Raspberry Pi. Well, a Raspberry Pi, a power cord, and an SD card, but you get it. Today we're finally doing the long-promised Getting Started with Home Assistant series. And in today's video, I'm going to show you how easy it is to set up Home Assistant with a Raspberry Pi. Now I'm going to try to make this video as beginner-friendly as possible. I'm going to take you through each individual step and show you how to do them in detail. So if you do run into a problem, feel free to leave a comment or find me on social media. Today we're going to install Home Assistant on a Raspberry Pi 4. We're also going to go ahead and get it configured, and then I'm going to show you how to install and configure some essential add-ons that are going to help you in the world of Home Assistant. So I've been using Home Assistant for about 4 years now. I started with it running on my Linux server in a virtual environment, and then decided to split it off and run it on a Raspberry Pi, because the Raspberry Pi version had a built-in store that was able to easily install add-ons. So I decided to move it to that separate device. It also gives me some redundancy just in case my server goes down and I still want to be able to maintain my lights and other systems in the house. So I started with Home Assistant on a Raspberry Pi 3B and then moved up to the 4 recently. I went from the 1 GB version to start with, then I had a 4 GB version, which is the one I have here, and then just recently moved up to an 8 GB version running inside of a fan-cooled case, just to give myself maximum performance. So what is Home Assistant? Home Assistant is an open source application that runs on top of Linux. It's not only a hub that can run something like Zigbee or Z-Wave sticks in it, it also acts as a central point to bring all of your various devices together, regardless of what technology it uses. Say you have a Philips Hue bridge and some bulbs connected to that bridge, and you want to trigger that light with a Xiaomi motion sensor. Well, out of the box, you can't do that, but Home Assistant can very easily tie those systems together and allow you to run different various automations on them. It's also a great single point to allow you to go in and view all the statuses of your various devices. So what else can Home Assistant do? Well, in my environment, my Home Assistant ties together my Zigbee, Z-Wave, Xiaomi, Wemo, Wi-Fi devices, sprinkler systems, MyQ garage door openers, Philips Hue bulbs, and a variety of other cloud-based services into one system so that I can quickly and easily make changes and also control them from anywhere in the world. I can use applications that run on both Android and on my iPad to feed data back into Home Assistant to make changes with it. So for example, on my Android device, I use Tasker to feed different scenarios to Home Assistant so I can make a decision. So for example, if I put my phone on the wireless charger next to my bed, after 9 p.m., it assumes I'm going to sleep, turns off all the lights downstairs, and activates my alarm for the next day. It also turns on the sleep tracking device that I have and sets the alarm in the house. So it's an extremely powerful but also easy to use application. Now looking at the Home Assistant homepage, you can see the variety of devices that are available to integrate with Home Assistant. Basically anything that has an open API or is a very popular service has been tied into Home Assistant in one way or another. Now running Home Assistant does not require a Raspberry Pi. You can actually run it in Windows, you can run it on a Linux server, you can also run it on a hypervisor like VMware, Hyper-V, or Proxmox. But the reason that I recommend people start with the Raspberry Pi is because of how simple and easy it is to set up. You basically just write to the SD card using an easy to use application, pop it in, and you're ready to go. All right, so what do you need to get started? It's very simple. The most basic thing you're gonna need is a Raspberry Pi 4. This is, like I said, the 4 GB version, but you don't need that. You can start with something like the 1 gig version if you're just getting started. But as you expand your network, you probably want to step up to a larger one. Optionally, you need a case to hold the Raspberry Pi. This is just the basic Raspberry Pi case. You just need something really to hold it, keeping dust and other things from falling inside of it. Importantly, you're going to need the right power supply. Now, this is the official Raspberry Pi 4 power supply that you can get from Amazon or wherever. I recommend starting with it because it outputs enough power to run the Raspberry Pi efficiently and also accessories attached to it. So on mine, I have a solid state drive and a Z-stick, which it can run that without any problem, and no other external power supply is necessary. You also need a micro SD card. I recommend starting with a 64 gig one. You can really get away with anything above 32 gigs, but 64 gigs gives you some expansion room for your database and allows you to install more add-ons as we go along. And now it is possible to run Home Assistant off of a solid state drive, and I actually have a video coming up, so once that's up, you'll see it up here in the corner. But they'll be coming here next week on how to set up a solid state drive, which is actually quite easy and gives you a lot of long-term capability with your Home Assistant instance. And finally, you'll need a USB, or in this case, a USB-C card reader. This is a nice one from Anchor. It's teeny tiny. My laptop has only USB-C ports on it, so this is great for a MacBook if you have one as well. And it reads both SD and micro SD cards. All links to all these are in the description below. And I also have a kit.co kit available that you can click on that will take you to show you a quick getting started with some links to Amazon. Now let's move on to flashing the SD card. All right, so now we're actually getting started setting up the SD card. So first thing you want to do is go ahead and take the SD card and put it in your reader and attach that to your machine. Make sure you can read it and access it. If you have flashed this with Linux before, don't worry, the application I'm going to show you will know that and go ahead and overwrite everything on the drive. So you don't have to worry about what format the drive is in already. The application will take care of it for you. Now that we've confirmed that the SD card has been mounted to the machine, let's go ahead and download the utility that we're going to use to flash the SD card. So I like to use this application called Etcher to flash all of my SD cards with. It's free and open source and pretty fast, and I found really never having any issues with flashing using this application. So you can obviously download it for other versions. If this is a Mac or a Linux box, you can go and download it, the version you need for those. But I'm going to go ahead and download the version for Windows. I actually already have it installed on my machine, so I'll go ahead and bring it up. And then while that's opening, we'll go ahead and head over to... All right, so let's go ahead and, now that we've got Etcher installed and ready to go, let's go ahead and head over to the Home Assistant website and download the latest installer for Home Assistant. So you can use the URL below. It's a shortened version of the bigger URL, or just go out and search for the HAS.io installation. Now, the URL here still refers to it as HAS.io, probably because Home Assistant was already taken on their website. So just be aware that HAS.io is the Home Assistant installer that will run on the Raspberry Pi. So they still have the older version out there for model Pi 3B and B+, both 64 and 32-bit. But it's advisable, obviously, now if you're to go ahead and run this on a Raspberry Pi 4. So you'll notice there's a 32-bit and a 64-bit version. It used to be that the 32-bit was the advised version for Home Assistant for the Raspberry Pi 4, but now they say that the 64-bit is just as compatible. So I'd recommend downloading the 64-bit. That way, if you do upgrade to the 8GB model, you won't have to reflash your SD card. You can just pop it over into the new Raspberry Pi and go ahead and keep using it. So go ahead and click on the 64-bit version, and it'll download the HAS-OS Raspberry Pi 64 5.10, and that's actually from the current version. Obviously, if you're doing this later on, you'll see a higher version number, but we'll go ahead and download that. And once that's finished downloading, which it is, we'll go ahead and bring up Etcher. And Etcher is very simple. All you have to do is click Select Image and find the image in your download folder, and then select the drive that you want to flash. So in this case, it's this 32 gig micro SD card. Obviously, I have more than one device here, so make sure that you're selecting the proper device. You do not want to select the wrong device and wipe it and erase all the data on there. So in this case, I am using a 32 gig drive just because it's what I had laying around. I, again, would recommend 64 gigs or above. So go ahead and hit continue once you select the drive, and then we'll click flash, and it's going to pop up and on Windows, it'll pop up an administrator console to say yes to. Now, once that's done, you'll want to go ahead and remove the card from the reader, place it into Raspberry Pi, and then plug the Pi into a network drop and apply power to get started. Now it's not required, but if you'd like to watch the progress, you can connect your Raspberry Pi to an HDMI monitor and watch as it sets itself up. The Raspberry Pi should reboot at least one time during the process. You'll need to wait about 10 to 20 minutes for the system to install itself on the Raspberry Pi. You can go ahead and go to the address below, homeassistant.local:8123. The link is in the description. If the Raspberry Pi is not ready, you'll see a notification saying, please wait. This could take up to 20 minutes. But after refreshing a few times, you should see the onboarding screen for Home Assistant. And then here's where you'll define the name you want to use for the account, the username for it, and a secure password. Especially if you're going to be exposing this to the outside world, you want to make sure you use a nice secure password. Then press Create Account. All right, and now you are in the Home Assistant home setup. In this screen, you want to give your home a name, and you also want to define its location for things like sunup and sundown and other weather-related items. So first thing you're going to do is go ahead and set your time zone that you're in, and also your elevation. Also, there is a detect function that can help you find your location data. And then finally, you want to go ahead and set your units, whether they're imperial or metric. Then finally, press the next button. Now, Home Assistant will show you any devices that it automatically discovers on your network, which you can select and modify here. You can also click the More button to manually add an integration. You can see from this list the available integrations that are built into Home Assistant. Click the Finish button to finish the Home Assistant setup. You will now be taken into the main UI. So now you will see the default home screen and any devices that were auto-detected as part of the setup process. You'll also see the default weather card showing the location that you selected during the setup. You are now free to finish setting up your Home Assistant instance. So now that we have the basics done, you can feel free to go off and customize your Home Assistant instance as you pleased. However, I'll show you a couple of recommended add-ons that I suggest installing day one to make sure that you make your life as easy as possible. So if we move over to the Supervisor tab down here, this will bring up the backend for HAS.io or Home Assistant and show you any of the installed add-ins, which of course a factory blank one will not have any add-ins installed, but you can jump over here to the add-on store and install some official and community add-ons that are super helpful. There'll be 3 of them from the official add-ons list, and I also have a link to a video that I've previously recorded about an unofficial add-on that helps you back up your Home Assistant instance into Google Drive. I recommend installing the Duck DNS add-on, the Let's Encrypt add-on, and the SAMBA Share add-on. Now, these first 2 can be skipped if you're going to go ahead and use the Nabukasa edition, because you don't need to open up any ports. You don't need to go through any of those steps, but you can skip these first 2 if you are going to go ahead and set up the cloud using Nabukasa. So the Duck DNS add-on will allow you to set up a instance with the Duck DNS service. You don't actually need this to set up Duck DNS, but this helps make the install quicker and allows you to update your dynamic DNS if you don't pay for a static address on your broadband. So go and click install, and it will go ahead and finish the installation. And then the key elements on all Home Assistant add-ons is you can choose to either start them on boot or start the add-on if it crashes. In addition, some of them have the capability updating the add-on automatically. So before we can start this, as you can see, I click start and it says failed to start add-on, configuration validation failed. So we need to jump over to the configuration, which is here. What this needs is it needs the token that's generated by the Duck DNS setup. So we'll go and open up a new tab and go to duckdns.org. And you're going to need to sign in with something like GitHub, Twitter, Reddit, Google, or Persona. You need one of these accounts to sign up with your Duck DNS. So we'll just skip through the sign-in process here and resume on the other end. All right, now that I've signed in with my Twitter account, I can go ahead and set up a domain. Now with the free account, you can get up to 5 subdomains that you can use for different things. Okay, so I've created this test house domain. So once I get everything configured properly, I can go to this testhouse.duckdns.org and it will automatically redirect me to my instance. It's going to detect your current IP based on how you're logged in. So if you're doing this from a different location, or if you're using a VPN, you'll need to update this with your current IP address. The token is the key here. So this token number, that you'll see right here is what we need to grab for Home Assistant. So go ahead and grab that. Click back over to your Home Assistant instance and replace this null token. So the token is just the first part that you need here. So we'll paste that in. The second part we need is the domains. You see where it says domains null. So we'll replace that with this testhouse.duckdns.org. And so that will replace this, of course, with the name of your domain and click Save. Now we can kick back over here and click Start, and DuckDNS will automatically update. So if there is an instance where your IP address changes in the background, it'll automatically update that for you. So if you go out to the web and ping that domain, it'll resolve to your IP address. So now we'll go ahead and jump back to the dashboard, and you'll see the DuckDNS add-on is installed and running. So next we'll go to the add-on store again, and we're going to install the Let's Encrypt add-on. So go ahead and install the Let's Encrypt add-on. And Let's Encrypt is necessary to create that SSL certificate for a lot of items like the Google Assistant function. Also makes your instance a lot more secure. So clicking over the documentation. So you'll have to go through a few steps here, which I can't replicate because I already have an instance set up. But you'll need to go ahead, and the first thing you're going to have to do, and we'll kind of cover this in the next section, which is you'll need to go ahead and you have to forward port 80 on your firewall to your Home Assistant instance, which you can find that by bringing up a command prompt and pinging hasio.local. And that should resolve that with the IP address of your instance. So you can go to your firewall configuration, which I won't show you here, but if you go Google your firewall maker port forwarding, you can figure out how to do that. So go ahead and forward port 80 into your Home Assistant instance, and then you'll be able to complete the setup as part of Let's Encrypt. All right, now that I have the port forwarded on my firewall, which I did in the background, we'll go over to configuration, and you need to fill out the information in here. So email would be your email address, whatever you want to be using here. The domain, so this is going to be your DuckDNS. So I had to fill out my email address. I had to fill out the domain that I'm using from DuckDNS, and then the challenge I'm doing is HTTP. As you saw in the documentation, you can choose either HTTP or DNS. So in my instance, I'm going to go ahead and just do HTTP. Click Save. Now click back over to Info and start that. Now it's going to reach out to the Let's Encrypt service and request a set of 90-day SSL certificates that are compatible with most major browsers. So that way you'll be able to go ahead and go in and say, hey, take me to HTTPS, this testhouse.duckdns.org, and be able to go ahead and forward it in. So now that that's been set up and configured, let's move on to the third add-on I recommend. All right, so now for the last step, we'll go ahead and install the SAMBA add-on. Now this allows you to access Home Assistant's file system from your Windows machine, or you can also access it from a Linux machine as well, but SAMBA CIFS is most commonly used in Windows. So this is a super handy one to have. You want to make modifications to your config.yaml from a local machine, or if you need to upload custom configuration components, this is the easiest way to do it. All right, so to get started, all we have to do is click on the SAMBA Share add-on. It's part of the default package, so it's already there, and then click Install. Now this will take just a minute, and once it's installed, the first thing you need to do is pop over to the Configuration tab and define your username and password. So by default, it uses the username Home Assistant and the password of null. So it would just be Home Assistant enter, but I like to put in a password here just to make sure. Now another thing you need to pay attention to is to make sure that your host IP address range is on this list. Mine is 192.168.1, or my VPN is .5, so this is perfectly fine for me, but we want to make sure that those are available so that way we can you can actually lock out. So I can go ahead and remove these two because I will never have to access it from any of those IP ranges. So again, this is a class B, so this would be anything 192.168.0.1 to 192.168.254.254. So everything looks good there, so we'll go ahead and click Save and start the add-on. So click back over the Info tab and click Start. Now, with most of these add-ons, you need to wait a minute before it actually comes online and you can actually utilize it. So you can click over to the Log tab and you can scroll down and see if everything is good. So, yeah, right here. So it says the daemon is started and it's ready to server connections. So let's go ahead and test that real quick. I'm going to bring up a Windows Explorer window, and you'll just want to go to the same IP address that you went up here with. And in this case, we will just enter Home Assistant. Now, since this computer I'm working on is actually a domain machine, it will assume the domain here. So I need to change the domain to the local scope of the server itself. And then it's Home Assistant. Home Assistant. Now, it's not something you're going to need to do unless your machine is already registered to a domain. And there we go. Now I can click in and I can edit my configuration.yaml right from here. Or any other files if I want to drop a custom component in or add some items that I want to be able to be accessible from the web interface, I can do that all from right here. Well, there you go. That's all the add-ons I'm going to show you today. Hopefully now you have a setup that you can customize to your liking. All right, so there you go. Now you have a fully functional and ready to go setup of Home Assistant. You can now port forward from your router and allow external access to your instance. If you don't want to go through that and you want to skip that section of it, you can also sign up for the Nabu Casa account, which is just $5 a month. I'm not sure. I'm sure it's equivalent in other countries. And that allows you to have external access to Home Assistant through their server instead of using yours, so you don't have to worry about port forwarding. It also allows for external webhooks, which is really nice if you're going to run another application to push changes to your Home Assistant, which I'll show you some of that in future videos. In addition, it has kind of one-click setup for both Google Assistant integration and with Alexa integration. So one of the ones that I really use is I've got a couple of LG TVs that are not directly supported by Google Assistant. And so I have it set up to use the LG integration. And then I use the Google connection in Nabu Casa to do voice commands like turning on and off and pausing my LG TVs. Now, I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please make sure you subscribe to the channel. I've got a lot of new content coming up in the next few weeks. I've set myself a goal to get some more videos edited and out this month. Some more Home Assistant videos coming out, along with some integration videos as well. If you did like this video, please make sure to give it a thumbs up. Or if you found it boring, give it a thumbs down. If you have a topic you'd like me to cover, please add that in the comments below. Also in the description, you'll see links to all of the equipment that I've shown. I've got some getting started kits that you can buy through Amazon that are really easy for Home Assistant. I also have links to my camera gear and some of the other software that I use in the description. If you want to support the channel, you buy items on Amazon using the affiliate links in the description. That goes to help the channel. As well, if you'd like to buy me a coffee or a beer, there's a link to that down below as well. Big thanks to Paulo Valente. He was the first one. He actually bought me 3 beers, which was really super nice, and it means quite a bit to me. So if you have any other comments or questions, please feel free to leave them below. I try to be active in the comments on YouTube. You can also find links here to all of my socials. They're also in the description below. I'm fairly active on Twitter. So if you have a question, you can send me something to my Twitter handle there. If not, thanks for watching the video and have a great day.